Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, in a recent interview you did with Wesley Lowery for GQ. You spoke about your decision not to report your sexual assault to police. And you told Wesley there's an intersection with the work of abolition and healing and contending with the fact that we as a people are capable of doing harm, but we are also capable of healing from harm. It's not how do we punish, but how do we process, and how do we heal, and how do we change? Can you speak more about this? And specifically, can you share how we can create a justice system that's structured around healing, around change, and around processing?
No, thank you. I think before I dive into that, I just want to acknowledge that there are survivors in this room. There are so many survivors in this room, because wherever there are people, there are survivors, and we all respond to all of these things differently. So it's not a matter of what we should or shouldn't do, or how we should respond in a situation or shouldn't respond in a situation. But I do think that there is that intersection between abolition and how we respond to interpersonal situations, and with ourselves too. Abolition, so often I think people try to fast forward to the end of the movie, and they're like, but what do you do if there are no jails in the United States? What do you do without police? And they try to paint that story. But it's important, I think, for all of us to acknowledge that abolition is not about the destination. I mean, the destination is to have a society that doesn't need prisons, that doesn't need But really is that it's about a journey. And abolition is about the journey there. And when we look at a situation, first of all, a lot of times people say, oh, well, if we don't have the system the way that it is, what are you going to do with all of the rapists? Very often, that's like the first thing that people grab for, and it's not a coincidence. Secondly, we should acknowledge that this system fails women and victims of sexual assault, period. Already. The U.S. carceral system is violent to survivors of sexual assault, because our system does not care, center, designed for justice in these situations. 80% of people who are assaulted by someone that they know, and over 80% of all assaults are never reported to our system. That is not a coincidence, and the overlap of those two things are not a coincidence. Because so often, an assault survivor has to not just deal with what just happened to them, but then they feel like they have the responsibility, it's their responsibility to decide if they're gonna tear their family apart, if they're going to really deal with the compounded trauma of turning in their father, uncle, boyfriend, whatever it is, in a short period of time or a long period of time. And at the end of the day, what we have to ask ourselves, what it solves. Because if what we seek is a society that doesn't do that, then what it means is that we need to have a society that changes men, a society that changes people in power, a society that changes how we view gender. And, if you read Angela Davis, Our Prisons Obsolete, our prisons are used as just dumpsters for the failures of our systems. Because prisons are how systems of power hide the fact, hide our mental health crisis, hide our poverty crisis, hide our housing crisis. So they can go out and say, capitalism is the best system and there's nothing better that we can ever do. And because they hide all of the millions of people that that this system has committed violence against. So what does a better system look like? Have we ever thought about or even asked ourselves the question of, when you go through court and we say, you know, did this injustice happen? Did this crime happen? And let's say they say, yes, it has. How there's nothing for the victim after that? The idea that sentencing a person who may have committed a crime is supposed to be what restores a victim after what has committed, you know, after what happened has been committed? Why is it that when we see that a person has, that a crime or that violence have been committed, that survivors don't have access to mental health resources, that our society does not provide for that family, that we don't even look, you know, even bell hooks. There's this amazing video and archival footage of bell hooks talking about this issue. And one of the things that she says is that so many people who also commit these crimes are survivors of abuse themselves. And so these are cycles that perpetuate. And we do so little to nothing as a society when we identify these breakdowns of these incidents of violence, of stopping this cycle. In fact, what we do is that we accelerate these cycles by throwing people in violent situations where we were just hearing earlier today where you have to pay $15 a minute to talk to a person. And so this is a space where we have to challenge our own preconceptions. And we have to, because abolition, it informs not just what we think about our criminal justice system, but it informs our friendships, it informs how we respond when we've been wrong, it informs our parenting, it informs everything. Because so many of us also grew up without even knowing in a carceral framework of childhood. When you do something wrong, you get punished, you get sent to your room, you get isolated, you get cast out, whatever it may be. Or maybe you were hid as a kid, you know, like that. We grow up in these frameworks and it informs everything and permeates everything. But if we start asking ourselves a question of, instead of how do we punish, but how do we change? How do we actually make sure this never happens again? And how do we restore and center the person who has been harmed and the people that have been harmed, instead of focusing all of our attention in how do we torture a person, which is what our system does. And at what point can a human being be redeemed? And can they ever redeem themselves? And we're so committed to a society where we say, no. Why is that? Why do we define every person by the worst thing they ever did, instead of what they are committed to for themselves?